All right. So as we're looking right now at screen, I want to make sure that you guys see where we are in 3.1 unit. Make sure that's there. Okay. And what's happened so far as we talk about reviewing what Unit 3 is, the new nation, building a nation. We start out with the Constitution, and we're moving through the first 5 presidents, Washington through Monroe, and the highlights of their administrations. So one thing that President Washington set up in the beginning was the idea of a cabinet, which is basically advisors over sections of the government to help those day-to-day operations. And the other thing, because it was temporary, he set up what we call an administration. And you'll see this word later in more presidents start using it a little bit later, that we now call administrations because they are temporary, of what the day-to-day government would look like. But under the Washington administration, he has, his first challenges domestically and foreign. And foreign just means away from, opposite or others. Domestic means home. So, his biggest home challenge or domestic challenge was the Whiskey Rebellion, which they put down. And then this issue of impressment that he starts with Jay's Treaty in 1796 on his way out, dealing with impressment. And impressment simply, guys, is going against foreign governments kidnapping or bullying American soldiers or Americans into doing stuff. It's manipulation into doing other processes. Mainly it was taking merchant ships and merchant materials and taking them and putting them into the French army or the British army. And that's what was really happening. Washington didn't do anything about it. And he ends up passing the buck along because he calls out a neutrality act for us not to get caught up in the French Revolution. And so it moves on to Adams. Adams quickly tries to address the French impressment, excuse me. And then, which turns into the XYZ affair that we talked about last week. Simply trying to go under the table and deal with the new French government because they tried to form their own republic too. They did not want to reveal the names of the foreign ministers or minister assistants that were trying to help free U.S. people and U.S. supplies. And so not putting it out to the public, they named them XYZ. That's all the XYZ affair is. Please go back and look at the XYZ affair. It's pretty straightforward what happens, which leads to a war with France, a quasi-war, because it wasn't official, because remember, only Congress can declare war. So the Americans and the French actually go through a series of naval battles for like 18 months to 2 years, unofficially off the table, as America gets caught up in the French Revolution. And so this leads to a fear from Adams that, which you guys are going to work on today, the Alien and Sedition Acts. This is what Congress passes with the help of Adams to shut down any foreign descent or national descent. And so simply the alien part made it longer for a person to become naturalized. So the first issues on immigration that came out of the Adams administration. And then sedition is when you are making hateful or mean things, which basically just ripped up the First Amendment because you should be able to say what you want about the government. This causes a massive uproar and is basically put down by Maryland, the state legislatures in Maryland and Virginia. And so it kind of just fades away. But because of this, what we're going to talk about today is the election of 1800. Is where we're going to pick up. The election of 1800. This is technically the fourth election in the Republic, And it's probably the biggest one, one of the major ones between the former vice president turned president and then the former vice president in Thomas Jefferson, now running to be the third president of the United States. So it was a real messy type of situation when you're looking at now the establishments of political parties. Just a few months prior, former president, as say, George Washington dies at Mount Vernon, and so now the first leader is gone, and so that hint of experience is already a miss. So everybody has to go ahead and try to figure out what to do without going back and being that active advice from George Washington or what his opinion is, or be able to step in and be the neutral force over the last 10 years. He died. So now the United States is going to a new vision of what they want the government to look at, as the federal city is now being put in place and deciding what to call it. They decided to call it Washington in honor of the former president, and it hence give it the District of Columbia as a neutral site. So if we talk about the election of 1800, why is it important? It's a major turning point. Like I said, the first 10 years of the Congress has been established, the Republic has been established. This conflict that's going to get resided between, because now you have political parties, the Federalists, and Thomas Jefferson is now emboldened to what is called the Democratic Republicans, which later splinters itself into the current Democrats and Republicans. But the Democratic Republicans of Jefferson are basically the anti-Federalists, and he gives them their first name. So you have the Federalists who want a strong government, and the Democratic Republicans led by Thomas Jefferson. They can't be president and vice president. They have two different ideas. And so this is where the election of 1800 becomes this huge change that they have to make. Okay. Democratic would nominate two nominees, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. And this becomes the new president and vice president, even though they're on the same ticket. This is a picture of Jefferson, of course, and Aaron Burr. The election ends up being tied. So it's the first tie in the Electoral College. And so all of a sudden you see like kind of a backdoor deal that's put out by the electors. And so this is where it said the United States is not truly a democracy, it's a republic, because these guys are making backdoor deals, or possibly at that time was making backdoor deals. Our electors are going to elect President Biden, or President-elect Biden. He will, on December, I want to say it's December 12th or December, I want to say December 11th. It's somewhere between the 11th and the 15th. They're going to convene. The electors are going to convene and cast the votes officially for President Biden. So they've been doing this now since 1788. But with the tie, as you notice right here in this section, Adams, who was running for a second term, was easily defeated due to the Alien and Sedition Acts. So the public really turned against him on his way out the door, and it becomes between Jefferson and Aaron Burr. Burr gets agrees to become the vice president to Jefferson, and so you have the first administration that's a complete ticket, when you have a president and a vice president as running the administration. Adams, on his way out the door, does a couple of interesting things that sets the nation up, and we're going to talk about that. But basically, because of the Alien Sedition Acts, domestically, he's ruined trying to stop the First Amendment. Okay. So technically, Jefferson won because you said it was a tie in the Electoral College. Jefferson wins, and he signs a little backdoor deal to make sure that he gets over the top by Federalist James Baynard to cast that blank ballot. And so when they recast it, He actually has one vote ahead on the second ballot because they run it twice. And so that's how Jefferson becomes the third president of the United States. Okay. And he agrees not to get rid of the Federalists in office that was on Adams to keep the government as stable as possible so he doesn't have to rehire all these new people. They just had to not try to do politics. And then not dismantle Hamilton's economic plan so the country can have a chance to grow. So under Jefferson's presidency is 8 years of wide issues that come up. He has to deal with the impressment issue. He has to deal with a domestic issue, financial issues that cripple the country. A lot of foreign issues that jump up during his 8 years. All right. So there's an amendment to the Judiciary Act of 1790. This is one of the things that Adams, which your assignment is going to work on today, that Adams tries to do, that Mr. Trump is even doing right now, is being able to say, well, I'm still on the clock. My time is not up until, at that time, it was March 20th. So he's scrambling, trying to put in as many things as he has. And one of the things that they passed is an amendment to the Judiciary Act of 1801. So basically, we wanted you guys to be able to understand that he creates 16 new positions for the federal judge system, and he starts packing them with Federalists so he can make sure that Federalist opinions politically can go ahead and be carried out under the new Jefferson administration. This came to be known as midnight judges. This is what happened even right now. For instance, with the new passage of Supreme Court judge with Ms. Barrett being put in, somewhat seen as a midnight judge in a sense, and it was trying to make sure she wouldn't be a midnight judge. That's why they were trying to hurry up and get her in before the election, because if Mr. Trump had lost, Mr. Trump lost, excuse me, and he did lose. If he went through that process, then he would have been seen as a midnight, she would have been seen as a midnight judge. He would have lost the legitimacy of being able to truly put her in during his last 60 days in office, which would later is going to be called lame duck sessions. You're in power, but you're not in power. And so Mr. Adams becomes the first lame duck president per se, because he's going out. He's lost his election. He's going out, and he only has a few weeks to make any more decisions. And so he starts doing this political move of putting in judges to carry out the political part of what's happening with the Federalist Party. Jefferson repeals them all because he's like, these guys are not coming in. I didn't put them in. And this is what leads up to Marbury versus Madison and judicial review, or setting a precedent in the government. So we want to make sure you guys understand that even though it was kind of shady of what Adams was doing, it sets up a precedent or a guideline of how the transition of power is supposed to play out. And so the courts step in, and this is how the first major case for the judges, Marbury versus Madison, you're about to see the same. John Marshall was one of John Adams' guys, and he gets named to the Supreme Court when he comes back during the XYZ affair. And so he's like, hey, he becomes Supreme Court justice. And so he starts trying to find a way to establish the third branch of the government. He remains justice for 34 years, and that was his goal. I need to find a way to bolster. He was a lawyer. He really wasn't a judge, but he's a lawyer. And so the senior controller is called Chief Justice. You don't have to be a judge per se. They want you to nowadays in the modern era, but if you're a lawyer, it means you know the law. And so you understand what the procedures are and everything else. You do not have to actually be a judge to be put on the Supreme Court or nominated Supreme Court. But now we have so many judges. It's very rare that you get a lawyer. I think Thurgood Marshall, I want to say Thurgood Marshall was never a judge. He was just a lawyer, and he got nominated into the Supreme Court. So you don't necessarily have to be a judge per se previously to be put on the Supreme Court. All right, this is a picture of John Marshall later in life. All right, we're going to talk about this Louisiana Purchase tomorrow because that's one of Jefferson's domestic policies, so I'm going to skip through that. But I do want you guys to see it on the screen. And this is one of the anecdotal reasons why Thomas Jefferson is on the $2 bill, because he doubled the size of the country. So if you look right here on the map, you will clearly notice the Northwest Passage, Northwest Territory that creates the 5 or 6 states early from your assignment, the original 13, and then the growing of the others. And he buys this area, doubling the size of the country. Louisiana, and all this land that's gone up here that creates all these more states from Napoleon. So we're going to get that, talk about his domestic agenda later. Are there any questions?